Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast, the podcast all about the delicate balance between people and business, and quite literally reconnecting the two. My name is Tracy Rubin, and I've spent nearly my entire professional career in HR. Join me as I share stories, opinions, and words of advice with you each week. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for another week. You know the drill. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. There is no video today. Your girl needed a break from the camera, you know? It's one of those recording days where I kind of just want to be me, myself, and my voice rather than me, myself, and my face. So if you normally listen on Spotify or YouTube, then you've probably been watching a lot of the podcasts on top of listening, which has been really kind of cool because I wasn't always super fond of the video side of things because I don't know. I think that people listen to podcasts probably more than anything. But at the same time, there is something to be said about being able to watch, a podcast or watch a guest interaction because there's so much to be seen when it comes to body language and expressiveness and things like that. So with all of the guest podcast episodes, I've always done video, but I've also recently been doing video in general. Just today, it's going to be audio only. If you have been around for a little while, you know that there is an opportunity for you to submit your questions that you might have for me, whether it's a submission through the voice memo, which you can get to by going to anchor.fm/HRTracy, or if you submit questions just through email or through Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm always happy to answer your questions. This week, I'm not going to answer any questions specifically, maybe at the end, but I did want to mention that there are a lot of conversations recently about how we as employers, HR professionals, can continue to engage employees. And I've been going on a lot of webcasts and panels as part of my job talking about how employee engagement can be driven through flexibility and autonomy and schedule empowerment and things like that, which totally is 100% true. And I am really passionate about this subject, which I will probably get into a little bit more throughout this episode. But I also wanted to mention that we all have an opportunity to think about our end user when it comes to making business decisions. And so as HR professionals, when I think end user, it really depends on the environment, the industry, the business that you operate in. So for my background, I obviously always operated in retail environments. And so my end user was often an hourly employee or a store manager or a district manager, depending on the business challenge, right? And I bring this up because I think sometimes we're making decisions. When I say we, I mean HR leaders, other business leaders. We're making decisions based on our assumptions or our predictions and not necessarily based on the facts or the opinions of the end user or the person that is potentially on the receiving end of your rollout or your business decision. And I bring this up because I think that there is a pivotal moment that we're in as leaders today, which is that we have this amazing opportunity to ask a lot of questions and to listen. And this comes up a lot, obviously, in the DE&I space, but it also comes up just in general when employees express frustration, right? It's like, well, I don't feel heard, or I feel like I'm not being listened to. Well, that is often the solution to many, many problems, and probably all problems and all challenges. If you actively listen to the feedback and the concerns of the people that we represent, right? So I recently got into or had a conversation with someone around why so many decisions are made without the end user or like the audience being at the forefront of the decision-making process. And I think it's like super easy for us, the decision makers, to think about our own experiences, right? And to think about who maybe put in thought about who the end user is, but forget to actually ask them. So this is what I want to talk about this week, which is when it comes to making decisions, how you can maximize the potential for those decisions to be successful. Throughout your HR careers, you are going to be confronted with opportunities to make decisions, to roll out new technology, to be part of something new. And I think it's really important that HR people are the ones that kind of bring everything back to center and say, hey, I just want to remind you, like, this is the audience, this is the person we're trying to like support, or that the problem that we're solving for applies to X, Y, and Z population. And I say this, and it probably sounds like an obvious thing, right? But I'm sure if you think back to a decision that you've made, there were probably opportunities for you to bring in that end user more quickly. So I'll give you a specific example. When I was at my last company, meaning where I was for about 5 years at SMCP, I was in a really awesome position to be able to make certain decisions for the retail population across North America. And I never took that for granted. Like, I loved the opportunity to really positively impact that population. And there were opportunities to, bring in new technology. The best example I have of this is actually when I brought Legion, my current company, into SMCP as a vendor for us, a solution for our workforce management, meaning like scheduling, forecasting, data drivers, automated scheduling, I should say, not just scheduling. And that was the technology that we brought in that I had the opportunity to bring in as the director of HR. And when we finally signed with Legion, again, Legion is my current company. So I'm in this really awesome opportunity where I was like once a customer of the company that I work for now. So I have this awesome like dual understanding. Anyway, I digress. When I was at SMCP, that job before last, we all know what happened with the last job. If you don't know, then go back a few episodes to the discussion on why I quit my job in less than 3 months. That is not the job I'm talking about today. Hopefully this is coming out clear to everyone listening. Anyway, when I was bringing Legion to SMCP, I had an opportunity to bring in some of those end users as part of the process for the rollout and the change management piece of rolling out new technology. And I share this example because I think it's actually a major win. Like, bringing in those end users while we were in the process of rolling out new technology was a win because we got to gain really amazing insights and feedback before rolling it out. And we got some, early buy-in. So when you get the buy-in, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, that getting the buy-in is one of the most critical things that you can do. When I was at Target, whenever we entered a new store or a new role, we were always told you have to spend the first 30 days getting the buy-in of the new team. And to do so, you often have to just kind of like put yourself out there, get to know people, right? Build relationships and find out who your key stakeholders are as well. And so it's very similar from a process standpoint when you want to gain the buy-in or earn the buy-in and identify key stakeholders when rolling out something new or when coming up with a new idea or making a new decision. Those stakeholders can make or break your idea, especially if they're really, really critical stakeholders. So, I think this example is something that I hope you take with you as far as like when you go into those decision-making moments, how you evaluate your decision, how you assess your project plan and your, how you map that out. Any chance you have to bring in someone that it directly impacts, like that your decision directly impacts or that the technology directly impacts, I think is something really important. And I've recently also spoken with other leaders about the benefits of HR leaders being a part of like critical business decisions. And it's probably not as frequent to find, or like as common, I should say, to find HR people on the inside of certain decisions made by a business. But I think it's so important. And someone recently said to me that, you know, HR leaders are business leaders, and we can't keep saying HR leaders and business leaders, because it means that HR leaders then therefore are not business leaders, which obviously is not true. So, you know, understanding, and there are going to be guests that I have on in the future that really speak to this really nicely. So I'm excited for you to hear those episodes. But I have some of the inside scoop here that I'm referencing, which is that HR leaders really have a huge influence on businesses and on business decisions. So it's really important actually that HR leaders are involved in many, many, many decisions made for the business and for employees. So how do you get in the center of these decision-making conversations? How do you get involved when, you know, maybe you're not involved today? I think the first thing is always to establish really strong relationships. So coming back to this buy-in piece, establishing and earning the buy-in, making really strong foundations for good relationships. Those things are what those things are going to take you really far, but they're also going to be the things that allow you the opportunity to weigh in. And you know, I've definitely experienced environments where people didn't value HR's opinion. And I've also experienced environments where the opinion of HR leaders was like really critical. So if you have an opportunity to challenge the way that other business leaders look at the HR department and the function, and to do so in a positive way, like you are going to actively work toward a better, stronger business period, but also better, stronger relationships that allow you to weigh in on critical decisions. So on this, you know, topic of critical decisions, you may work in an organization today where you don't even know what critical decisions are being made until they've been made. So how do you even become part of the team that's in the know? And I always hated being out of the loop. I don't know. I always wanted to be one of the first people to know things. And I don't know if that makes me nosy, or if that just makes me inquisitive. I prefer the latter. I prefer inquisitive over nosy. Or if that just makes me like someone that, you know, wants to know every single thing that's going on, and maybe like a bit, I don't know, maybe overbearing. Like, what does that make me? I don't know. But all I know is that the more I've been in the know, the happier I've been, because I feel like that transparency allows me like full comprehensive scope as I operate day to day. So if that makes me inquisitive, nosy, or overbearing, so be it, you know? So for you, if you know, there are people who don't want all of the information. The less they know, the better, because their lives are more simple that way. That is totally okay. Maybe it's just then a matter of asking questions before you roll something out or before you make a decision, so that you are not, you know, working against yourself or doing something that in 5 months from now is going to be antiquated and never used. If you're like me and you like to know what's going on and you like the transparency, then again, I think the relationship piece is really important, but also building trust with your own leader and other leaders in the organization. That's going to allow you to be a trusted partner, but also someone who's brought in as a thought leader. And so, you know, you can see we're traveling down this journey of decision making. What happens if you are a trusted partner and thought leader and you make a decision that ended up working out negatively or didn't quite, you know, maybe it missed the mark. It didn't quite hit the target the way you expected. That's okay. When you listen back to last week's episode with Brad Fetterman about cultivating culture, we talked a little bit about accountability versus ownership. And this is where when you're making a decision, when you are having an influence on the operations of a business, owning the things that you do, owning the decisions that you make is going to make you even more trusted. Even if you make a mistake, even if you make a decision that ends up being, you know, a wash or a loss in some way, that's okay. You own it and you learn from it, And then you can move forward in a way that's actually super positive, because not every decision that we make is going to be a good one. Not every decision that we make or thing that we roll out is going to have a positive impact on this end user that we talked about at the beginning of this episode. And again, I think it comes down to the ownership, and I think it comes down to the learnings and the takeaways from the journey to this, revelation post decision making. So if you as an HR leader have an opportunity to make a decision, you make that decision, you have a comprehensive understanding, you're a thought leader, you're trusted, you've been entrusted to make certain decisions, and it doesn't go well, the best thing you can do to remain a trusted partner and to remain a trusted thought leader is to ask for feedback, own the potential challenges that or outcomes, negative or positive. And, in asking for feedback, reflect on it. Don't just ask for it and do nothing with it, right? Those moments of reflection can really make you a lot stronger as a leader and as an HR practitioner. So, to give another specific example, let's say you are an HR leader and you have an opportunity to roll out a training that is intended to mitigate risk. And maybe it's intended to mitigate the risk of, meal penalties or something like that, right? And you roll out this new training and you look at the metrics after the first 3 months following the training, and you realize that you have the same number of compliance issues as you had before the training. It doesn't necessarily mean the training was poor, but it could mean that the training was ineffective. So now you have an opportunity to ask for feedback, and maybe you asked for feedback after the initial training. But now having these metrics around compliance after the training, you actually have a benchmark. Okay, I rolled out the training 3 months later, same number of compliance violations, which, could potentially mean that the training was not direct enough, not effective enough. So how do we make it more effective? Maybe you realize instead of a classroom-based training, you need to do something a little bit more hands-on. Maybe instead of a speaker to audience type of format, maybe you realize you do a panel, or you do something more interactive like role playing, for example. Those things, that type of feedback, the reflection on your decision making or your rollout is sometimes the best thing that you can apply to a challenge, because now you have all of this data about something that you were trying to solve for, and now you have additional data. That's amazing. That's a gift, right? So I share all of this because, I think as I continue on my own journey through HR, there are always going to be obstacles and challenges and decisions to make. And not every decision is going to be, well evaluated. But the more you can comprehensively approach a challenge with many questions and hopefully ideal solutions, then that means that as you make those decisions, you are collecting more informed feedback and data as well. So, I guess to come back to this point that I mentioned earlier around maybe there's a question I can answer. I did get a question recently about quitting this person wanting to quit their job, let's say. And this came after this individual listened to my podcast episode on why I quit my job in less than 3 months, which was my most recent role before my current role. And they said, well, I don't know if it's the right decision to make. Do I even quit? Do I give it a shot? And so it made me think about how we make decisions. So again, this whole point of this episode, how we make decisions, who we bring in, how we evaluate those decisions, who the end user is. So in this case, the audience, the end user, is this person, the person writing into me saying, how do I know if this is the right decision to quit or to stick it out? And so what I said to this person was you need to evaluate for yourself if the cons outweigh the pros. So again, making a comprehensive decision based on, making a decision based on all of this comprehensive information, right? You have information about your leader, about the values of the organization, the direction of the organization, the people you work with, the work you're doing. All of those things create for a comprehensive understanding of what will lead you to making a decision. Then I said to this person, you have an opportunity to evaluate all of those data points. and to evaluate if it's really as bad as it feels, or if maybe there's an opportunity for you to change your mindset. Because sometimes decisions and rollouts or things that we do in our careers are creating sometimes more problems than actually exist. So you have to almost evaluate, like, am I actually solving for something or solving this challenge when I make this decision? Or am I just not addressing the challenge at all and creating more challenge? Because it's not easy to start over somewhere, right? Like, quitting a job can be highly glamorized. And so whenever you make a decision, you have to really weigh both options or all options, because maybe there are more than two. So I also said to this person, okay, you're going to do that. And then finally, like, have you spoken with anyone? Have you shared with anyone within your circle, people who know you, that you're going through this, that you're experiencing this dilemma almost of a decision? And I think that's where, evaluating feedback comes in when it comes to a decision-making process. Are you asking people who are really in your corner what they think? And are you listening to that feedback? Because I think there are moments where we are not super happy with our jobs or not super happy with a current challenge, and we're trying to find a solution. And so if it's about your job, maybe one of the solutions is to quit. But is that always a solution? It depends, right? It depends on how many cons you have over the pros. So in conclusion, what I said to this person is like, yeah, it might be worthwhile quitting, but if you can see an opportunity or a moment where this gets better, it might not be the right decision to quit. So I share that story, and it's not really answering a question. It is really more so sharing a story, because I think that this, every decision that we make comes back to these like sets of frameworks, evaluating the problem that you're trying to solve for, comprehensive understanding of the challenge, evaluating the result, understanding the data from the result, and really like asking for feedback on the result, and then assessing, like, does the challenge continue to exist? Is there a different way that we can solve for this problem? And if yes, what do we need to change about the way that we made our initial decision? And if no, maybe the result was really positive, then what are the takeaways and what have you solved for? So that's kind of the methodology that I apply when it comes to making decisions personally and professionally. I think sometimes I think way more clearly professionally, and there are probably opportunities for me to slow down a bit personally. But at the end of the day, I do think this methodology is like pretty effective, at least for me. And I'd love to hear from you if you have like a specific set of parameters that you typically follow when it comes to making decisions, or if there's something that you do habitually to, make decisions that are informed and, thought through. So with that, I am going to end this episode with a reminder that you can follow me on Instagram at hrtracy. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm in the process of changing my name from getting married last year. So even on the podcast now, I put my maiden name in parentheses. I have to change the whole introduction of this podcast. It is quite laborious, but in terms of my decision making, I think I'm making the right decision to change my name, but keep my maiden name in there because, I started this podcast as Tracy Rubin, and professionally I'm now known as Tracy Chernoff. And here we are, right? I support my decision to change my name, but I'm also making it work for me. So with that, I do hope that this helped you if you're in the process of making a decision that maybe you've been going back and forth on. And I also, again, want to remind you that it would be so helpful if you could rate this podcast 5 stars, if you could review it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you are consuming this podcast week after week. And if you could share any of these episodes or this podcast in general with a friend who you think would be really interested, that would be amazing and super helpful. In terms of next week, it is Passover, but I will have an episode for you. I will not be as dialed in on social media, but I will have an episode for you next Tuesday. It will be a guest episode, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. So make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening to this, follow the show. Thank you so much for being here, and I will speak with you next week.